He is on Zoom.
He's on Zoom.
Okay, we've got James on Zoom. Welcome, James.
Hey, thanks. I apologize about that. That email slipped through. I was out of town yesterday and I thought it was canceled. So I apologize about that.
Okay. Well, good evening and welcome everyone to the Santa Clara City Planning Commission for December 9th, 2021. Welcome to all the city officials. Thanks to staff who put this all together for us and for the public. You're the entire public today, Wendell. Welcome. If you will follow Shelley Harris in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful for this opportunity that we have to sit together in council as a planning commission. We are thankful for this city in which we live and for the friends and family that we have here. We would ask you to bless us this day that we can be mindful of these items that are put before us, that we can make the best decisions and that we can for this city. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Got a pretty easy working agenda today. Public hearing is number one to consider the proposed code amendment. And you've got that right, Jim?
I do. Thank you, Chair Weston. I'll go ahead and go through that.
Perfect.
At our last meeting, it was a month ago. It was November 9th. So the same night, a month. Yeah, today's December 9th. Our last meeting was November 9th. We had a work session and we discussed the proposed or upcoming code amendment needed for Chapter 1724, 28, I mean. That's our requirements for walls and fences. We had a good discussion with the planning commissioners in a work session. We went for about 45, 50 minutes and went through that. As a result of that, it stopped working again.
Sorry.
It's doing, oh, was that me or you? Okay, okay. All right. Well, I was excited for a minute. Anyways, I'll talk. So we had our work session last month. It was time well spent, we felt. Since that time, Cody and I have been working on this quite a bit, and we worked on it the month before coming to you. So the two of us have worked on this for a couple months now. We feel that a rewrite is needed for this chapter. We want to make this very user-friendly for property owners, developers, fence companies, as well as city staff to make interpretations that are clear and transparent and, you know, not asking city staff to just make an interpretation. We want it all in the guidelines and in the ordinance. We did have that plan as discussion with you on the 9th. Prior to that, the week before that, we had a discussion with the city council. They were also in favor of moving forward with doing an ordinance amendment. This item is a public hearing tonight, so I don't know if we have public on the call or here with us tonight, but I would still recommend that the Planning Commission open the public hearing, and then if we don't have any comment, we can close the public hearing before making any motion. The proposed ordinance is a rewrite of the title or chapter 1728. It does include 3 new sections. And so we've added 1728.030, which are general standards. We've added 1728.140, which are utility meters, and 1728.150 wall and fence materials. As far as state code requirements go, we are compliant with Utah Code Section 109A205, which has requirements for land use ordinance amendments and what the public hearing requirements are as far as noticing. We've met all state statute and meet those requirements. Planning staff recommends that the Santa Clara City Planning Commission hold a public hearing and forward a recommendation of approval for this ordinance amendment to the City Council. So before we get there, I'd like to go to the draft ordinance itself, the working draft. that one. And if we could go to 1728-030. I hope the commissioners have had a chance to review the draft. You can see the redlining is new language, but this section 1728-030 general standards is a brand new section. And so Cody and I were tasked to take a look at the ordinance and make changes as needed or necessary for the reasons I previously mentioned. And so this section is new. One thing that we feel is strong here is item C: when installed on a shared property line, a fence wall or retaining wall located on an interior property line separating two residential lots with differing elevations, the maximum height of the fence, wall, or retaining wall shall not exceed 6 feet above grade on either side unless. And so you have to meet both of these criteria. First, the property owners adjoining the fence wall or retaining wall agree in writing to a greater height. And second, a retaining wall is placed against the cut area to retain the natural grade, in which case the fence wall and retaining wall combined shall not exceed 9 feet in height when measured from the lower lot side. So we talked about this at our last meeting, and we can go to some pictures in a few minutes. I know our chair, Mark Weston, wasn't here. We do have some slides that I could run through briefly that the other planning commissioners previously had a chance to look at. Would you like to see those?
I looked through them.
What's that?
I've looked through them.
You have looked through those slides? Okay.
Mhm.
Did you have any questions on those slides or?
No.
Okay. This makes sense. This was this references or would take effect for the slides that showed the two lots side by side, where one lot was at a higher grade and one lot was at a lower grade. And they did a retaining wall and then did a 6-foot fence on top of it. And both property owners agreed to it. And so that allows for 6 foot on the high side and 9 foot on the low side. But they were allowed to do that because of the requirements here. But we've made it more clear. Before it was just basically the two owners agreed to it. But we've put a little bit more here. You know, it has to be placed in a certain way and it cannot exceed 9 feet. Now, you know, if a fence comes to the city and it exceeds 9 feet, if it's a 10-foot fence, that has to come to you as planning commission members. So we would bring that back to you for your consideration. If we could go to 1728-140, that's kind of towards the end of the ordinance. Scroll up just a little bit.
There we go.
It's fast. Yeah. 140 will be down just a little bit. There we go. So utility meters. This was a concern with our power department and public works, and I had a chance to discuss that with them. We've added the language access to utility meters shall be readily accessible. Enclosing a utility meter with a wall or fence is in violation of city code, and we make reference to that section. And that refers to access to premises. So we're just making sure we are compliant with that. And then the next one, 1728-150, there was some discussion or a question about materials and colors. What we have here is building materials that are not specifically manufactured, listed, or commonly used to construct walls or fences are prohibited. So, you know, they're going to have to show us that that's a legitimate fencing material. You know, we don't want someone coming with some material that doesn't meet specs or try to use some wood crates or something of that nature. So we're just making sure everything is there. And if we could go down to 170, we did make a change down here as well. And I'll just open it up for your questions, but I just wanted to let you know, we cleaned this up a little bit. It says barbed wire or similar fencing material is prohibited in all zones except for agricultural. However, barbed wire or similar fencing materials allowed for security purposes for public utilities or facility uses and shall conform to the following. And we talk about the wire or similar material being pulled tight and not rolled or coiled. And then we talk about the straight strands and not exceeding 7 feet. So if it's a public utility like a well house or a cell tower or a city facility, we would allow the barbed wire, and it may not necessarily be zoned ag, but we need that for security purposes to protect the asset. And so we'd be looking at that. So that's what I have for you. I'm happy to answer any questions. And we have Cody Mitchell here as well as our building official if the planning commission has more questions. I don't want to go through each section verbatim, but we're happy to answer any questions the commission may have. Thank you.
Shelley, go.
So you mentioned in our discussion last time that the material itself, and I see there's some, but like to see through like a railing or something like that on top of the fence, does it matter? It still is limited to 9 feet no matter what.
Yes.
You can see through it or.
Right. It would be, because there are fences where people might do a 6-foot block and then a 3-foot wrought iron on top, and that's a 9-foot fence. So everything counts
Okay.
with that height. But that's a nice fence. A lot of people have done those in their backyard, and especially areas with pools. The other thing is I want to say non-opaque, non-solid, but we use a different term. What's the term we use? Non-side obstructing. So those fences can be a little bit higher in a front yard setback. Instead of the 3-foot solid, they can be 4 foot because they're 50% partially open. So some of those fences can be a little bit higher along property line because they're open. There's site visibility through that style of fence versus a solid wall. So we've tried to be flexible and work with people, and we're trying to think of every situation that could potentially happen. I think we've done a good job. There's always something, but we feel like this will be a good, usable ordinance for the city that everybody will understand. So.
I read through it. I thought it looked pretty good. I did have one question, which is if somebody wants a 6-foot wall, but there's a 6-foot retaining wall on the downhill side of that, 4-foot setback from the retaining wall to the 6-foot wall. Is that what we want to see?
It's the 1-to-1 provision, right?
1-to-1. So it would have to be 6 feet back.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And we think that would create a really nice look rather than, there's always situations you can go to and say, how did that get done? But moving forward, we want to say, if you have 6 foot and then you have 6 foot with the 1-to-1 and then another 6 feet, that would be a lot more presentable.
Okay.
And allow for landscaping and to break that wall up.
Good.
Yeah.
That was the only thing I had.
Okay. I don't know if we have James on the
anything
call.
from you?
I don't have any questions. I enjoyed the meeting the other night.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, then I guess we can go and open the public hearing on that. And we will do so. Open this public hearing for the proposed code amendment to chapter 17.28 and requirements for walls and fences. Do we have any online? None. Okay. It's up to you, public.
Okay.
Nothing. Then I'm going to close the public hearing right now. And we'll move on to a recommendation for city council to amend this zoning ordinance. Is that?
Yeah, I'll make a recommendation to the city council to amend the Santa Clara City zoning ordinance, chapter 17.28, requirements for walls and fences for the city of Santa Clara.
Second.
Excellent. You'll second that? All right. I have a first from Ryan and a second from Shelley. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. Okay. That was an easy one. Now we've got some discussion items. Water efficient landscaping conservation.
Yes, thank you, Chair Weston. We wanted to bring a couple items to you tonight. We had mentioned this one at our last meeting to the Planning Commission that we might be moving forward on this. We wanted to make the Planning Commission aware of what's kind of going on out there. Perhaps you've heard some of the rumblings or some of the discussions or seen some of the things in the news about creating a water efficiency or water conservation ordinance countywide for all of Washington County. The Water Conservancy District is part of that. They're spearheading and leading that charge. We do currently have kind of a moratorium in place. We passed an ordinance in September. Ordinance 202111 was passed by the council. An ordinance enacting a temporary land use regulation to require water efficient landscaping in all new development. pending the adoption of a permanent ordinance in response to the severe drought conditions in southern Utah. So this is something the governor made a lot of key statements on during this year's legislative session. We're right at the end of the year, back in March and April. And different communities have been tasked up and down the Wasatch Front, as well as southern Utah, to put some ordinances in place. We're extremely dry in southern Utah and Washington County, and we've been in a drought cycle for a while. And so that ordinance was adopted back in September for a period of 4 months. Since that time, the Water Conservancy District's been working on a model ordinance countywide that they would like all the communities to consider. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but they have provided a model to us. And that's something we're looking at. We're just in receipt of it the last few weeks. About 3 weeks ago, we received the draft language, and we have formed a committee of staff members who are currently reviewing that and looking at it, and want to bring that forward in the new year, likely in February, to ask for adoption or consideration of a water efficient and conservancy or conservation ordinance. So our time, that 4 month, and going back to that briefly, is expiring. The shot clock ends on January 8th. So last night at the city council meeting, we adopted a new ordinance, 2021-2016, extending that period for 2 additional months, giving us to March 8th, because the statute and state code allows us to do a 6-month moratorium or put something in place for up to 6 months. Previously, it was decided to do 4, but we came back and asked for 2 more months, which the council adopted last night, to allow us to put an ordinance together that meets the needs of the community. And so that's good. There's good support in the community. There's good support with our elected officials, at a higher level and at a state level behind this. We've worked with Zach Renstrom with the Conservancy District. And some of the things, it's interesting, and I just want to mention to you some of the things that are talked about in the model ordinance. And I wanted to let you know, I'm sorry, Dustin Mortson has joined us tonight. He's our Public Works Director, so he's here to help answer some questions as well. He's been a part of this discussion this whole last year, as this topic has come up and been discussed quite a few times. But when I read through the draft ordinance, it's very interesting. It says, it is in the public interest to conserve the public's water resources and to promote water efficient construction and landscaping. The purpose of this ordinance is to protect and enhance the community's environmental, economic, recreational, and aesthetic resources by promoting efficient use of water in our community's buildings and landscapes. So the key here is our community's buildings and landscapes. So this is an ordinance, or would be an ordinance, that is conservation inside and outside. So up north, and I say this over and over again, I'll be real quick. I was working with communities in the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District. They were looking to do water efficiency standards for outdoor landscaping, to limit the amount of lawn area, to do more drip, bubbles, limit areas of sod and park strips, things of that nature. This ordinance has gone beyond that to this draft. This is for the interior building or construction of residential and non-residential type of construction, as well as outdoor landscaping. So it covers both. And so that's a very important key here, that they talk about, buildings and landscape. The next thing I wanted to mention, there's a section specific to single family and multifamily residential. And there's some unique standards here, some construction standards that they're proposing. It says builders, developers, or owners constructing new single family or multifamily residential dwellings, right up our alley, we have a whole bunch of that going on here in Santa Clara, shall install hot water recirculation systems, unless hot water delivery can be demonstrated to occur without first displacing more than 0.6 gallons of system water. So recirculation shall be demand initiated. The next one, and it uses shall as well, so it is a little bit of a mandate. Builders, developers, or owners constructing new single-family and multifamily residential dwellings shall install water sense labeled fixtures, including but not limited to faucets, shower heads, toilets, and urinals. The next one, it says builders, developers, or owners constructing new single-family or multifamily residential dwellings shall install Energy Star qualified appliances. So that's another one. It talks about multifamily projects have to be separately metered or sub-metered. So there's no question on how those utility meters will be put in place. Now, here's one thing that we've been trying to wrap our heads around is it gets into landscaping standards, and it talks about single family dwellings and multiple family dwelling projects. And the guideline here is a little restrictive. This says the total irrigated landscape area shall not exceed 2,500 square feet and lawn area shall not exceed 750 square feet. So that's pretty limiting. And so that would be both your front and backyard. That's not 750 in the front, 750 in the back. So they're saying 2,500 square foot total, and that's your area of drought tolerant landscaping with drips and things of that nature, probably the base of each plant, because a lot of the desert landscaping is rock and other things, and they're dripping right to the bush, the tree, or the plant. But they're being very limiting with the sod and because putting culinary water on your sod outside is use of a resource that we need. And so, that's a concern here. They also talk about dwellings having water sense certification. And they talk about usage of gallons per month and things of that nature. But taking a step back, we've run some numbers, and it's just very, very conceptual. In our city, we have a lot of R110 zoning, so minimum 10,000 square foot lots. We have a bit of RA zoning, minimum half acre lots. And we have a bit of mixed lot size where they range from 7,000 to 10,000 square feet, but average more like 8,000 to 9,000 square feet overall in a project. So just running some numbers, looking at 10%, 15%, 20%, it gets kind of restrictive. If we were to say you can only have 10% of your lot and lawn area for an R110, that would be 1,000 square feet. That's still more than they're proposing at 750 square feet, but that would allow 1,000. If you had a half acre lot, that would allow 2,178 square feet. If you had an acre lot, that would allow 4,356 square feet. So that's one way of looking at it, but we're potentially looking at a sliding scale, and we're not exactly sure where that number will fall. We know we have some folks with larger homes and bigger lots, and we need to put some regulations in place, but we're a little bit concerned about that 750 number. It seems a little bit limiting, especially if you have half acre lot. And we have a lot of folks that do have half acre or larger lots. So we're drilling down and taking a look at that. Right now, I'm just wondering if we should open it up to a few questions, and we have Dustin here as well that can help with that. The commercial standards are a little less restrictive, but they are still restrictive. Let me just mention those real quick. They are similar. And I had those highlighted earlier today. Oh, one of the things I wanted to mention, and I should have already mentioned it, they're very specific about park strips. No sod in park strips. And they're saying no sod in the park strips, no sod in any area that is less than 8 feet wide. And no sod in area of slopes that exceed 25% or greater. So if you have a hillside in your backyard or a drop off and you have those slopes, no lawn in those areas. So that's a change. And then golf courses need to irrigate with reuse water or irrigation water, secondary water. It talks about car wash projects, what's allowed there, because they can be a huge water user if they're not using a recirculation system. And Dustin knows a lot more about those things than I do. But when we get into the commercial standards, it's limiting as well. And again, it says shall install hot water recirculation system. That's a nice system. And we've been talking about that. A lot of us here on staff don't have that. And so we've compared numbers on how long it takes our water to warm up. And I've heard anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple minutes. And so a couple minutes is usually, unless it's a weekend, if I have to get to work, that's all the longer I'm in the shower is a couple minutes. And if it takes your water that long to warm up, that's a waste of a shower. So there's that. And it does use the term shall install WaterSense labeled fixtures and shall install Energy Star qualified appliances. So these same requirements will come into play for residential and non-residential uses community-wide, and that will be moving forward once this is adopted. And just what we're hearing out there, St. George will be adopting, and we're looking to adopt, and Ivans and Washington City, those are the ones I've heard about that have interest in adopting something as well. I'm sure there's many others, but those are the other communities right adjacent to us that are looking to adopt a new ordinance in the new year. So we have until March 8th to adopt something. It's a work in progress. We're working on it at staff level. We anticipate bringing something to you in February and then to the council after that. But we hope by that time it's a very finished product. If we run into any snags, we'll come back and discuss it a little bit more with you in January as a discussion item as well. But it's hard for me to anticipate that at this point. But right now I've spoken way too much and I apologize for that. I'd like to give Dustin an opportunity to add anything that I may have missed, which is likely.
Pretty well covered it.
Okay. Thanks.
The only other thing I can think of is we're faced with, is this something we implement just on culinary water or secondary water also? Because there's a shortage on both sides. So we're going to take a serious look into that. And then they've got no watering between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. from June to September. And a lot of people start to water long before that and water a lot later than that. And other than that, I think Jim covered everything. Does you have any questions?
So are you saying that it will be restrictive on secondary water as well?
We're looking at it because there is a huge shortage on that. The canal company, there's so many connections out there right now that we could switch over to secondary, and they're won't allow it because they're worried there's not enough water for the shareholders. So unless you have a share, they won't hook you up, which normally they would on a non-drought year.
So the other question I had is enforcement. How will the city enforce this? Like if someone gets a house finished, you get a CO, then they go and finish their backyard later. How do
We talked about that.
Yeah.
We talked about maybe a permit, but will they come in and get the permit?
Yeah.
So that's-
it's going to be hard to enforce. Like that's why I'm.
It is, and it's going to require another level of staff review. So when someone submits, let's say a subdivision, actually I'm going to say a multifamily. Let's say someone submits a 50 unit townhome project similar to Heritage. We're going to have to look at that landscape plan and the irrigation plan and see if it meets the requirements, meets the standard. And then it will require some inspection by planning and zoning and the building department to make sure it's installed correctly and actually operational. But we don't want people to cheat or not do it. We're hoping honesty is the best policy, but all we can do is our best. None of us are experts, but we can make them meet the standards and hope they play nice moving forward. I think most people will. I think they realize here that we're short on water, and do they want their kids to have a place to live at some point in time?
I agree with that. It just seems like
Yeah.
you always get one or two bad apples. But
Oh yeah, there's going to be that guy with the acre lot that waters every morning and every evening still. So
Is there-
Speaking of bad apples, I have a question, if that's okay, Mark.
Go ahead, James. Sorry.
So what you said that the rules were going to be a little bit different for businesses, but you didn't say what that was going to be. What does that look like? And why would they have some sort of a different thing than the residential?
I misspoke. The standards are very similar for both residential and residential. And the use of the, that system and the use of Energy Star appliances and the use of certain type of plumbing fixtures, it's required for both, whether it's single family, multifamily, or non-residential commercial office. It's required all the way across the board.
Okay, thank you. And so my other question is, what about gray water? Do we have any application for using gray water?
No, from what I understand, that has to be mandated through the health department. I know Moab has gone to that. I've actually been out there and witnessed some of it.
Mhm.
But up to this point, the health department's not allowing that.
Okay. And one other question I have, I've been in another area where they had some pretty limited resources and they did a graduated cost on the water. So if you used whatever, I don't even know how much water we use, but say if you're an average house and use, under 10,000 gallons a month, you pay this much per gallon. If you pass that, the next tier, you pay, 20 or 30% premium for your water. And if you are up at the top tier, you pay a premium every time you bump up, so that the people that consume the most pay the most, which money doesn't translate into water, but it does motivate us a lot of times to, if I have to spend $500 on new appliances at my house and I can save that in a year on my water bill by getting down to that next tier, I'm more willing to do that than not.
Yeah, Santa Clara's had that in place for many years. We've
Okay.
been the high water users.
Okay, cool. That was my question. Thank you.
Is there any restrictions on pools or water features? Does it talk about anything about that?
Yeah, no water features. And there's been talk about requiring pool covers, but it's such an expense to the owner or the builder. And that's not going to force anybody to close them. But pools are one of your biggest wastes of water with evaporation.
Yeah.
We're still in the discussion phase of that. And all this too, all these landscapers have to go by an approved plant list with several drought resistant plants. They can't just put anything they want in anymore.
So the other question is, if on a lot, 2,500 feet of total landscape, right? If it is.
Well, I'm sorry, this is louder than that microphone. That's the guideline that the Conservancy District has said, 2,500 square feet total with 750 square foot lawn. We don't know if that's going to be the case here in Santa Clara. Each community is going to kind of do their own thing. They're going to take the model and kind of adjust, for their needs. So
okay.
I don't know what that number is going to be, but it seemed the comments we're getting back so far is it seems a little bit limiting. It'd be different if everybody had an 8,000 or 10,000 square foot lot, but we have a good variety or varied lot sizes in the community. So. But it's going to be less than it is now, and we're not going to get sod and park strips. So.
What about the? I've always been a big proponent or advocate for usable lawn, as opposed to like people just put grass because it looks pretty, and I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But limiting, grass just for fun and make grass more of a functionality of usable, like
That's one of the biggest parts in the the commercial zone. It's no ornamental grass.
Mm-hmm.
They're putting in, say, a playing field. That's okay, but nothing outside of that. And we're catching developers come in right now, like we did one today, and they had ornamental grass all the way around the whole project, and we told them no. So yeah, we're definitely wanting to follow through with that.
Okay.
And Dustin makes a good point, and the previous point about the landscape standards, plant selection and tree selection. There is a list that we'll be making reference to that the Conservancy District has provided, and they have the demonstration garden for people to take a look at as well. So there will be a list of materials that can be used. So. Any other questions? Kelly, did you have? Okay.
I'm gonna just absorb all this.
Yeah, it is. It's a big thing. It's something that, it's new, it's different. I think traditionally people, growing up, you had your home, you had your lot, and you had your front lawn and your back lawn, and you played on it, you did what you wanted, and you mowed it and watered it and took care of it before you could go play your chores on Saturday. But times are changing. It's pretty limited. I moved into a house where we probably have maybe 1,000 front and back, a little bit in the front and bigger in the back, but there's a lot of desert landscape or water conservation landscape with drips to plants and bushes and trees, which is quite nice. We like it, but I don't have kids at home anymore. So it's going to be a change for some people, especially those that have kids and that want to play and do things. It's a little bit different. I think it will cause people to think about what they're doing and where they live, and maybe walking to the playground and the ball fields for that open space area. And we're kind of seeing that trend now with the higher density. There's a center playground, or you walk to a regional park or another area for open space, because with these developments that are a little more dense, like Desert Village or Heritage Point, you're not getting a big yard space. You might have a private courtyard area. Single family is going to be a change too, because they're not going to just have all that sod. So we'll see where this all goes, but we should be back to you in February, because we've been tasked and asked to get something adopted for the community, along with all the communities in Washington County, for that matter, have been asked to do something. So
I'm a big proponent of the hot water recirc pump.
yeah,
Works great until it doesn't. I don't know if you guys have ever had to replace one. They're about $1,000 right now. And I remember I've replaced 5 in my house over 16 years.
really.
And I remember during that second Great Depression we had in 2009, I went a year and a half without buying a new one because I couldn't afford it. And it takes that 3-minute wait time to almost double that, because of the way you have to run the hot water line in a loop. So anyway, just saying, if people go and it breaks down,
Yeah.
then
So
there'll be a lot more.
I have a question about that, Mark, and you have some experience with this. What about those instant hot water heaters? I see a lot of people do that, where they just put those on-demand hot water heaters in different parts of their house.
Mhm. Yeah, like a
To me,
small.
that seems like something we could include in the ordinance, because I'd rather have that than a recirculating loop.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think that's why we have the option, if you can get delivery within 0.6 seconds. It's,
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
I would meet that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm on the longer end. My wife said it's taken up to 2 minutes. So a little bit of time to get that warm water.
Mhm.
So any other comments on this one for now? Thank you. You've written those down, and I appreciate your participation in that this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Should we move on to our discussion about the detached ADU in the front yard?
Yes.
Is that a tent just in the front yard?
A yurt. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about what's kind of going on and what we're seeing out there. As you know, we came to you in October to get that IADU ordinance approved and adopted according to House Bill 82, mandated by the state, that allowed for interior accessory dwelling units. Last year in 2020, the city passed an ordinance allowing for detached accessory dwelling units in a rear yard in an R110 or an R18 zone. That was brought before the Planning Commission and Council, because a lot of communities have allowed those for a while. And so that allows a guest house, what we call a guest house, a casita, the different terminology you hear, generally located behind the rear plane of the home or in a backyard, up to 850 square feet. And so what we're seeing out there, and what the request is, would we consider the option of allowing a detached accessory dwelling unit in a front yard? And so this would apply again in the R110 or the RA zone, like the adopted ordinance from 2020 that allowed the detached in a backyard. And we're starting to see a few of these. If you go out to Sun River, there's a number of these. They call them casitas. They're detached. They're in a front yard. I don't know the exact size, but I'm guessing a lot of them are in that 500 to 600 square foot range. They use it for their friends and family and guests, maybe a mother-in-law apartment in the case of those areas. And there are some other areas in St. George that have those. Some other communities have been brought up as well. We need to take a little bit closer look at some of those. But the main issue here is, are we comfortable with allowing a detached ADU in a front yard? What would the setbacks be? Are we comfortable with the lot size? and what should we allow the accessory dwelling units to be as far as size. So Cody and I have talked about this one quite a bit the last couple of weeks and working on it. And Cody's here tonight to answer some of the planning commission's questions as well. But I just want to throw out real quick what we're thinking if it's found to be acceptable in a front yard. However, it would have to meet the same setbacks as the primary dwelling unit. So in an R110 or an RA, the front yard setback's 25 feet. A side yard setback minimum is 8 feet. And a rear yard is 10 feet. So the rear yard setback's pretty minimal. But if someone has an R110 lot and they have 10,000 square feet and they haven't used the whole building footprint of the lot for a home, and they have room for one of these and they could meet setbacks, I think we would be okay with that. With the need that we're hearing, housing affordability and having other options available to the community to fill that need or fill that void. Lot size, we had this discussion. Let me take it a step back. So we just discussed this last week with the council in their work meeting. They have their first meeting each month as a work meeting. We did discuss this with them. And one of the main issues that came up, and Cody can speak to it in a few minutes, is habitable versus non-habitable. And then in our ordinance right now, it talks about a barn or an accessory structure. So when we read that, that's an accessory structure like a detached garage, a barn, that's uninhabitable. Habitable is different. So in the case of an ADU detached, that's a habitable dwelling. So if we're saying that has to meet the front yard setback and the side yard setback, 25 feet and 8 feet, it does. And we need to be clear in the ordinance, habitable versus non-habitable, because what's been run into a few times is someone does a garage in their backyard and they elect to put it in that corner, that perfect corner space in the very back of their yard that shares a side yard and the rear yard, but they place it at about 3 feet because there's no utility easement. The ordinance allows them to do that. Then they come back a year later and say, hey, we want to finish that attic, for living space. That becomes habitable. So that would not be allowed. So if you're anticipating habitable space, it has to meet the setbacks. And we feel like if you could meet the setbacks in the R110, which is a minimum 10,000 square feet, but we have a lot of lots in the city that are much bigger than that in the R110. There's a number that are a third of an acre or larger. If you can meet the setbacks, you could potentially do it. In the RA, it's really not going to come into play so much because it's a minimum half acre lot size. And, they range from half acre to an acre. And then the ADU size, we had a discussion on that, on what would be acceptable. We feel the ordinance is a little limiting right now where it talks about a minimum of 450 and a maximum of 850. So what we've thought is maybe allowing, we're looking at this, and this number doesn't just come, from anywhere. I've worked on a number of these and seen a number of ADU ordinances. And for the most part, the average is about 1,000 square feet for an ADU, for a detached, for a guest house. That's kind of the average. Now, an IADU, we can't limit that square footage. You'll recall the state said, hey, if they can use as much of the house as they want, as long as the primary, as long as the owner's there using part of the house. So if they have a Rambler that's 3,000 square feet, 15 and 15, and they want to rent the whole basement out, they can. There's no restriction on that. So in this case, we're looking at a size of up to 1,000 square feet. But then the other part of that is maybe we have a bit of a sliding scale that says up to 1,000 or 30% of the primary dwelling unit square footage, whichever is less or whatever. So if someone had a 3,000 square foot Rambler and that was the footprint of their home minus the garage, because we're not counting the garage, we're counting the living area, they could do a 900 square foot ADU. But if someone had a 4,000 square foot home, my math is failing me. I don't know if it was 4 or 5, but they could do up to a 1,200 square foot ADU. So theirs could be a little bit larger. So we're looking at that possible option as well, not just at 1,000 square feet. If someone's got a big house and a larger home and they've got the area for it and they want to do a 1,200 or 1,500 square foot one, and it makes sense, we're okay with that being allowed. The other thing is about separation. And I'll let Cody talk to you about that very quickly about separation between primary dwelling unit and the detached ADU and what could be allowed. So I'm going to stop now and I'm going to let Cody talk for a minute about some of his items because I know he's thinking and I know he's got some things he wants to bring up with you. So thank you.
I'll just touch on that. Right now you get a reduced setback. You see these accessory buildings going in the back corner, encroaching into those side and rear setbacks. And the ordinance allows that, provided you, or with the exception, you provide 10 feet of separation between the primary structure and that accessory use. Once that becomes habitable, you don't have to meet that 10 feet of separation, but you do have to comply with the setbacks. So that's something that we would clarify moving forward as well. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Is that the same in commercial and residential?
Well, commercial, I don't know that you have the accessory habitable element with commercial.
Historic commercial.
One thing I wanted to
Would the
mention.
rules change there or would it be?
Go ahead.
Well, I think we would look at the use if you're currently using that commercial residential lot as a residential use, then we would apply the residential parameters to that.
We have, and we've driven around and I'm relatively new to the community. Cody's lived here a long time working for Ivans, but try to go out and take a look, walk around, see what's out there. We have a good number of properties that, you have the home and then the front yard, and then you have a hillside that just kind of goes up or a drop off that just kind of goes down. And they're relatively large in size, but they may be on a cul-de-sac. And so they have quite a bit of area in front of the home. And, there are situations where I think it makes sense to allow something like that if somebody wants to have them. The other thing that's been discussed is, not only is it a potential option to help with a little housing affordability, it could be a rental, it could be a mother-in-law apartment, it could be a situation where the primary dwelling is sold to a family member and mom and dad want to stay there and they get to live in the casita or the guest house and live out their days because they want to stay in the community. So just flexibility and options. That's what we're looking for here.
Is there going to be a restriction on nightly rentals for those accessory dwelling units?
Yes, they're not allowed to be nightly rentals. They have to be long-term rental, which is 30 days or more. Nightly rental is 20, the short-term rental, nightly rental is 29 days or less. But for the most part, I think they're rented out for 6 to 12 months at a time, sometimes more.
I do have another question. I have a buddy that's doing a business in California and they're doing these modular homes. And so for modular, someone take it's not necessarily on foundation. It's a house that they put in these people's backyards and they rent them out as long-term rentals for income. Is there going to be any different kind of restrictions if it's not, it's attached to the power, sewer, water, but it's not a structured building. It's more of a modular type,
I believe it would have to be on a foundation, but I'll defer to Cody. That's my understanding. And they would share the same utilities, just like the other ones do. But
Yeah, so it would have to comply with the zone and it would require a permanent foundation and wouldn't be allowed to be separated by utility. You'd serve it by the same water and power meter.
can't be subdivided. They can't sell it off. It runs with the ground and title of the primary home. So
yeah, I think California adopted a similar ordinance, but they did allow these modular, they're really attractive looking. They're not,
is it kind of like a tiny home?
basically it's a
Yeah.
tiny home and they're allowing them because of that financial burden
Yeah.
where people can put them in their yards, in their backyards. There are setback requirements, but they look nice. They're
Right.
attached to the.
I know that large downtown metropolitan areas, Salt Lake's looking at it, Portland, Seattle, those kind of cities are looking at it to help with the homeless population. But there's a lot of governmental entities involved in it. I don't think that's what we're attempting to address with this, but that's a great question and a good idea. Tiny homes are tough. It's an issue that's been grappled with. And I'm imagining or thinking at some point, our lawmakers are going to say communities have to start allowing those in limited areas. So it could be something we're back here in a year or two talking about. Because I don't think ADUs and IADUs are going to answer all the problems. They're a tool. They're part, there's something that can help, but there's still going to be challenges.
So I have a question. What does this even look like? I've never heard of an ADU in the front yard. Do you have any pictures of any that you could share with us?
I don't for this presentation. It's just a discussion, but I can bring it back next month as a discussion part 2. And actually, we'd be bringing it back next month for a public hearing. But what we can do is put some pictures together as part of that presentation. We can go out and get some pictures, but we know there's quite a few in Sun River. We know there's quite a few in plan unit developments or, cottage style homes or garden home communities. We've seen quite a few of these. We can do a little benchmarking and bring some photos back next time we meet. We're happy to do that. But we do have them here in Washington County.
Thank you.
Clayton Levitt built some in a subdivision over off of Dixie Drive.
Okay. Yep, I'm up and down that street all the time, so I'll go take a look. Okay.
I was just going to touch back to the modular units on a temporary foundation. That would be more of, and I don't know what Santa Clara's zoning is for an RV park, but just went through it a little bit with my previous employer that was suitable for that use, an RV park where you've seen cabins, one after another set up, typically for transient activity. But that's something that would possibly be entertained with that RV zone.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's potentially, if needed, one could be created in the community to allow for, that land use, perhaps in one location. But we'll see. It is pretty catchy, Tiny Home Nation and all HGTV. You see these things all the time, but a lot of them are mobile and on trailers, and they're, they can kind of pull them to property, and they find property in different places, large properties in the mountains or countrysides that may allow for it. But I did see one where it was a coastal community, and there's such a housing challenge there that they're allowing everybody to have one in the backyard because price is multi-million-dollar homes. Who can afford to live there? But it's something we'll have to deal with eventually, I think. But we're just trying to create some flexibility and options for people. We'll be happy to bring pictures next time we come as well. We'll bring a good amount.
Okay.
We'll put Cody in them this time. I'll take the pictures. Any other comments on this one?
I don't think so.
Thanks again. It's helpful to get your comments.
Okay. Moving through the agenda, the last thing we've got is just the approval of the minutes from our last meeting on November 9th.
I'll approve it.
I'll second.
You'll do it?
Yeah.
Okay. Have at it.
Well, he said he.
Okay.
motioned to approve the
Right.
minutes.
I second it. I'm trying to find it. Sorry. I propose that we approve the minutes from the meeting on November 9th.
Excellent. Okay. I've
I'll
got
second.
a first from Ryan and a second from Shelley. All in favor? Aye. You have something else, Jim?
Just very quickly before we adjourn, I want to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Thank you for being on our planning commission. Look forward to working with you in the next year. And we'll see you on January 13th of 2022. It sounds weird, but it's going to be here real quick, 2022. So thank you.
Hey, I did have, while I was sitting here thinking, as far as the setbacks on the accessory dwelling units,
Uh-huh.
what is the purpose for the accessory dwelling unit ordinance? Just to allow more affordable housing for people?
Well, that's one of the big things, affordable housing options, also allowing people that may be on a set income that are still living in their home and the kids are all gone, to help pay for their house, to help as an income with that. Could also be used as a mother-in-law apartment or for family members, like a child that goes to college and comes back, just the flexibility of having those. But housing affordability is the big push right now for ADUs and IADUs at a state level. But we have other, it's used for other options too, as well.
Well, my thought is if I see the setback requirement in the front, but in the back, if we do push it, because usually in Santa Clara, you got an 8 to 12 setback.
Correct. Uh-huh.
If we take away that 12 feet and limit it, it is going to prevent a lot of people that could build an accessory dwelling unit, that they're not going to have the room to do it. So I do wonder how that will affect if we go to that setback, even in a
Yeah.
detached unit, depending, I mean, there has to be,
Right.
maybe we need to think about that.
I think when we come back, what we'll do is we'll have some photos and we'll have a couple diagrams that we can look
Okay.
at and discuss that as well. That'd be a good way to go on this, because what happens with an ordinance like this or IADU or some of the others is once we adopt the ordinance, we want to create handouts for the community so they understand. So when they come in and a builder asks, he can take it to the homeowner, or the homeowner can come in and get the exhibit and take it to the builder. They understand. It's easily readable and understandable. So
Okay.
we'll create something and bring it back. We've got a little bit of time. We'll bring it back to you.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
I can touch a little bit more on that if you'd like.
Yeah.
If I bought a lot, an R110 lot, and I have 20 feet out front, 10 or 8 and 12 on the sides, 10 in the rear. Essentially, I could build setback to setback. I could build a large home that occupied the whole lot. With that, I'm not obstructing or being obtrusive to the neighbors. They have 10, 12 feet, 8 feet, depending on which side I'm neighboring, correct? If I build a smaller home and I want an accessory garage, for fire code, to acquire that reduced setback, I have to provide that 10 feet of separation. So then I get the reduced setback on the side and rear property lines. If you want to make it habitable, you shift back inside that. You no longer have to provide that 10 feet of separation because you own both habitable units, whether it's a detached, a casita, accessory dwelling unit, and your primary home. You own both of those. If there was a fire that broke out, it's your liability, your loss. Once you reduce that setback, now you're affecting your neighbor. And so that's you offer that 10 feet of separation for your reduced accessory dwelling, and then neighboring, the closest you can get is 5 feet to property line, as well as your neighbors coming in from other sides. They have that 5 feet also to provide that 10 feet. 10 foot's the magic number by the fire code and the International Residential Code, as far as that matters. Does that help?
It does. I know that if you do, you can build within 3 feet. Is that right? If you do have a certain
Firewall.
Yeah, you can have windows on those sides, and you can't have, there's certain restrictions that can do it.
Sure.
And then there is a height restriction as well. I'm wondering if there is a way to maybe limit those setbacks if there's a set of guidelines to follow for fire, for windows, for height. So if someone does have a pretty small yard but still wants to do an accessory, that it's possible with a lot more restrictions.
Well, keep in mind, I mean, one thing we often overlook when we are granting reduced setbacks is that there's a utility easement that borders all of these property lines. When there's a new plat recorded, you have a 7.5 foot easement around your side and rear property lines, 10 feet out front, and that gives an utility easement essentially 15 feet to go if they needed to go down and split property lines for utility use or access. So in offering, and this is something that came up in the work meeting, in offering the reduced setback, the utility departments are sacrificing that easement in some cases without really going through the abandonment process. So if they truly had to get through there and it was a detached garage, much easier task to go in and take that out as opposed to an accessory dwelling unit. The value is significantly higher. So something else to consider as well when you consider that easement.
Okay.
And then as far as lot size, the comfort level is a 10,000 square foot minimum for something like this. Because we have the other options. There's one in the backyard. There's the internal accessory dwelling unit that any single family homeowner in the city can do if they go through the process. So there's options.
Okay. All right. You're all dismissed.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Merry Christmas. Thanks for saying that.
Yep.
Happy New Year.
All of you as well.